We can move away from the self-doubt and the sense of, oh, who am I? Who am I? In the face of this huge tradition with these tzaddikim and holy people. And, if we really can step into our sense of, well, I'm exactly who I need to be. And there's a real opportunity right now and an invitation to step into something bigger.
Hi, I'm Tanya, and you are listening to Human and Holy. Today's episode is a gorgeous conversation with Chaya Lester, a psychotherapist, author, speaker, and spiritual guide. She's also a spoken word poet, my personal favorite, and I've been following her work for years. Her rhythm, her words, her mastery of language, and her ability to take spiritual ideas and just bring it into words that literally feel like they are dancing is enormous, and she shares a poem at the end here. I'm so grateful to Chaya for this conversation. We spoke about living in a Messianic time, how to really lean into bringing the Aleph, the revelation of redemption, into our daily experiences. We speak about dreams and how to access this prophetic energy in our own experiences, even if we're not naturally accustomed to it, and how to just become more sensitive to the godly reality and experience that is floating all around us. Chaya lives in Jerusalem, Israel. We're living in such potent times, and either it can send us to the edge of the abyss where we feel so helpless and hopeless about it all, or it can really lead us to this deep faith, trust, stepping into our voices and being able to access something that's going to really bring the world to a better state. Today's episode is sponsored by Josh and Goldie Greenberg, the Iler Nishmas, their son, Yosef Dovid ben Yehoshua, in honor of his birthday, which is Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Happy birthday. May your neshama have the highest aliyah, and may any godly connection or inspiration that happens through this episode be in his honor. Thank you, Josh and Goldie, for sponsoring today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Toveedo, which is an online subscription platform that creates Jewish content for children of all ages. I am so passionate about the work that Toveedo does, bringing Jewish content in a really safe space for our children. The things that we consume have such an impact on who we are, and definitely when children are at a young age and their minds are literally sponges, the things that they watch become a part of their subconscious mind, their inner workings. And so I am grateful to have a platform like Toveedo, where when I do give my kids screen time, I know that I'm giving them screen time that's aligned with Jewish values, and that I don't have them on YouTube just being able to accidentally find anything that's out there, but it's this contained space with Jewish content, meaningful content, educational content about Jewish holidays and Jewish values. Check them out. We have a code for you, HH10, to get 10% off. They are such a great platform. I really encourage you to check it out for yourself, your own family, gift it to a friend. It's a really incredible platform created by a Jewish family that was looking for Jewish content for their own children and realized the dearth and made it happen. Today's episode is brought to you by Zelda Hair, which is a wig company that obviously makes beautiful wigs at affordable prices, but also has a really beautiful soul behind the brand. Zelda, the founder, is creating conversation around hair covering for Jewish women, how to experience hair covering in a more beautiful, wholesome, integrated way. Hair covering is a very deep and difficult mitzvah for many. It is our hair and something that we are so deeply connected to. So being able to really unravel the deeper meaning behind why we do the mitzvah, how to make it more enjoyable and beautiful emotionally and somatically, and being able to have a practically nice and enjoyable experience covering our hair. Check them out, Zelda Hair. All their links are in the show notes. Check out their beautiful wigs, check out their podcast, and all the work that they're doing, and just starting the conversation around hair covering in a really beautiful way. Hello, how are you? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you're here. I have been following your stuff for years. I don't even know how I found out about it, but I've known about it for forever. I write poetry. I'm a spoken word poet. So any Jewish poet is on my radar. So I've just and you have such a way. I was I need to have her on the podcast. So here we are, and I'm so happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
Have we started? Have we actually, this is us doing it?
I think so. Let's just jump in. It's a pretty organic conversation. Let's start with you introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Great. I'm Chaya Lester. I live in the heart of Jerusalem, and I have 4 beautiful children. And my husband and I, about 13 years ago, founded the Chaya Center, where we bring together Jewish wisdom and psychology And that's sort of the umbrella for a lot of the work that I do. But I do all sorts of different creative and healing endeavors and spiritual endeavors here in Jerusalem and online. And so I kind of split my days between obviously taking care of my family and living the life here. Using Google Translate a lot to follow the WhatsApp messages
Oh
that
my gosh.
flooding me from my children's schools. Um, and I do therapy with private clients, but then I also do a lot of retreats and lead women's groups and lead Jewish meditation and write books and do spoken word. I mean, a big calling, certainly the past year, has been trying to articulate the Jewish experience here in Israel in particular, and like what it's been like to live through this war and come through it empowered and strengthened and with a sense of calling, as opposed to just, wrecked by the heartbreak of it all. So,
Right.
it's a real. I have just like a very broad um, a broad spectrum of things that call my soul, and it's all just so rich, and I feel so blessed to do it all.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You really do have such a wide spectrum of things, but they all come together pretty seamlessly. Like all of those things can be so interconnected, and you're obviously doing it. This is a random question, but my instinct is I always think about, for people who are masters of the English language, what does it feel like to be living in a place where you don't really get to express yourself to your fullest extent, just when you're out in the world, interacting with other Israeli people?
Yeah, I like to say that in English, I'm like riding this like mighty steed, and in Hebrew, I'm like on a lame donkey who's just fumbling to get across the street, and it's definitely humbling. I mean, any of these opportunities to be humbled, I try to embrace them. So it's definitely humbling to really be a bit of an outsider here. I mean, deeply engaged outsider, but when it comes to a lot of Israeli culture, I'm kind of clueless, even though I've been here for 2 decades or more,
Wow.
off and on. But it's humbling, and we're immigrants, but it's a country made up of immigrants.
Right.
Our children are fully Israeli, and they help us a lot with the language. And God bless them that they're having to really. I'm not the mother who's on the board at the school active in the way that maybe I would have been in America.
Right.
And my kids have had to take up the slack for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so it ends up being that you raise children who can then support you because they are so integrated in Israeli society. Tell us a little bit about you write such deeply spiritual poetry, and obviously you're doing so much other work as well, but because I have been reading your poetry for so long, and I would say more watching your poetry, because you're both a brilliant writer, but you also have that mastery of rhythm in your presentation. So tell me a little bit about your spiritual background and your writing background that led you to now writing such spiritual poetry. All of your poetry coming out now, obviously post October 7th, unpacking what's going on in Israel, but even before then, just writing about the biblical, just invoking so much biblical imagery and so many Jewish deeply spiritual concepts in your work. So give us a little bit of that backstory to your background.
So my backstory is that I always have I've always been a spiritual freak ever since I was Carrie Renee Kaplan, growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, totally not Jewishly connected per se, but I was this little girl who would have dreams, and then the dreams would come true. And
Wow.
I don't know if you remember Lockerbie, the Lockerbie plane crash, one of really the earliest plane hijackings, which was I was a 13-year-old girl, and I had this dream about a plane flying from London to New York and exploding. And I remember popping up out of my bed and running down the hallway to my parents' bedroom and turning on, this is when you had to turn on the television manually, and I'd turn on the TV, and there was my dream on ABC, was this plane that had been hijacked. And I never spoke to anybody about it. I didn't even speak to myself about it, but I sure did store that away as interesting information. And over time, I just accumulated I knew, I had a dream about the day my grandfather was going to die 6 months beforehand. I just accumulated these moments of vision that were inexplicable. And there was no context or vocabulary for that whatsoever in my family growing up in Memphis, Tennessee. God bless them. I mean, we went to shul a couple times a year, but there wasn't a larger context. So the one thing I was Jewishly connected to was the Holocaust. And I was like, oh my God, tell me about the torture of my ancestors. Wow, that's something I can get into.
That's
so I went to the March of the Living and then went to Israel. And the rabbis could just smell me out, and a rabbi came up to me and was like, listen, the Jewish tradition believes we have a soul. And at night, our soul is able to ascend into other realms and receive information from angels and receive information about what's going to happen in the future. And I was like, oh my God, all of that's happened. All these things that you're saying have happened to me. And nobody ever talked to me about it. And the more I learned, the more I was like, oh, that happened to me. And oh, that. So for me, my spiritual path has been one of uncovering what I already knew in my soul and kind of came in with I think we all come into this world with certain hard drive programs on our hard drive that are there. And I happen to come in with, the ability to dream and the ability to channel certain, channel things, channel poems or, an emotion, and healing. There's different, we all come in with our different gifts and tools, and mine were just really strong. And I've just been living an accumulation of those gifts every day. And the more I align myself, the more I'm able to be a channel for, something higher or something, from the collective unconscious of the Jewish people that somehow I'm in a really good place, or particularly when I've had coffee, or particularly when I'm crying about something that really is touching my heart, which has happened so many times in the past year.
Yeah.
Then it opens up, so it's a lot about learning the instrument of that channeling in myself and working it and exercising it and being really diligent about writing down my dreams and recording my dreams and taking time to write my poems and just prioritizing those practices.
Oh my gosh, there is so much that you just said. First of all, I believe that many artists are prophetic in that way that you're describing. You are a channel for something that is beyond you. It's so beautiful to hear you describe it as I am a channel for poems. I am a channel for emotions. You are channeling something beyond yourself through you, obviously through your unique vessel, and then bringing it out into the world as something that people can touch and taste when maybe previously it was just this floating dream in your subconscious, which is so powerful. And even just having that spiritual experience that you had it in your soul. You said that hard drive, you were born into this world with that spiritual knowing. And when you started learning about Judaism, you were like, I knew this already. This was in my psyche. Tell us about that experience. What was that like to be I came home? I know all of this. Describe that for me.
So many examples, but I'll bring up one, which was when I first came to Israel. I went down a night trip down to Eilat, and the minute I saw the water in Eilat and I saw the Red Sea, and I literally jumped in with my clothes and I went swimming, and it was late at night and it was so fun and, free. And then I came out and I was lying down, and then we went to the hotel, and I was lying down in the hotel and I heard this voice. It said Tehorah. And I was like, whoa, I've never heard a voice before. And I don't know what Tehorah means. And I just took note. And the next morning, I was sitting down with my friends who were much more learned than I am, and I was like, y'all, I just had this experience. I went and did, this. I went in the water, and then afterwards, I was sort of in this liminal state, and I heard this voice say Tehorah, and my friend was like, "This, you won't believe this, but there's I think it was the chief rabbi of Israel. He said he had heard a Torah from him that said that when a woman takes a mikvah, a voice comes down, a bat kol comes down and says Tehorah." And I was like, there's sources for this. There's books that talk about this, and there's a word for it. concept called a bot hole that people talk about and learn about. And I just was like, that was it. I was like, sign me up, tell me more. So it just explained these experiences that I was having that I didn't otherwise have a way to understand.
Wow. That is a phenomenal story. Like having that recognition of like, wait, they write about this? Like it just happened to me. And there's like it's in the written word.
I've experienced many of the phenomena that are written about in our sources, where these are things that people would be like, no, normal people, no, only tzaddikim have that, or only this. And I'm like, no, I'm just a normal person, but it's part of my hard drive. It becomes a little complicated.
Wait, what do you mean it becomes complicated? Like people are doubtful of you or just like sort of judging the experience?
People find it hard to connect to, and people can be doubtful or judgmental. And so I have to figure out the best way to manage, no, Da lifnei mi ata omed, it says above the Torah, know before whom you stand. So I have to know my audience before I talk about too many things. And maybe I'm talking about too many things with you right now, so it's just something that
You're like, who knows?
I'm aware of. I don't want people to, like, generally, like I work with psychotic patients. I've worked with this, a population who hears voices and sound. Like, I understand that it's there's psychological issues that can also have these phenomena with them, and thank God I'm psychologically healthy. But I understand why people would find it, frightening or unsettling or unbelievable.
I actually would love to talk about that, the prophetic nature of being a human being and how I believe that we can all tap into that intuition, that soul's voice, that like the Torah is our story. It's like we're literally taught it when we were in the womb. It's all inside of us. And so being able to listen to that, I think, is about like getting sensitive to the inner voice. And I do think that so many of us actually have access to it, but don't necessarily like get quiet enough to hear it. And it sounds like you were kind of like born as a very sensitive soul, listening to your dreams, like really just like having that inner sensitivity. You're an artist. And so you're naturally like picking up the signals. But I believe the signals are there for anyone who wants to like pick them up and listen. I'm curious to know like do you think there's like anything that we can do to like get more sensitive to these spiritual signals, this like inner wisdom, this Torah inside of us, this ability to like experience the Torah intuitively, organically, and then discover, oh, it writes it, like it's written in the text?
The main gateway is emunah and allowing ourselves to believe that it's possible, and to believe that lo b'shamayim hi, it's not in heaven, it's not some faraway thing. The revelation and prophecy, it's here in our mouths. And believing in ourselves, believing in the possibility of the birth of a new prophetic era for our people, like being serious spiritual chutzpah to say, yes, I believe that these things are possible and beautiful and worthy of being accessed.
Tell us a little bit more about spiritual chutzpah.
So we're in unprecedented times, I would say, is the biggest force that I think we can harness right now to say to ourselves, something different is happening here. We can have that spiritual chutzpah to believe that a new reality can be born right now. We're really in this historic process, and if we keep our eyes open and our souls open to the enormity of the changes that are happening, whether that's politically and with wars and with internet and technology and all of the forces that we're swimming in, I think all can be harnessed to say we're in the beginnings of a Messianic process. And maybe not even just the beginnings. I feel like we're pretty deep into the middle of it at this point. And when I do that, when I really take seriously what we're living through, particularly here in Israel, then there's a certain acceptance that I have inside of me of, yes, I have had prophetic dreams, and I'm meant to have prophetic dreams, and we're meant to have prophetic dreams and visions, and we are coming into an era where that is part and parcel of our human spiritual evolution. And I just think the more we can lean in to the truth of that, and we can move away from the self-doubt and the sense of, oh, who am I? Who am I? In the face of this huge tradition with these tzaddikim and holy people. And, if we really can step into our sense of, well, I'm exactly who I need to be. And you don't want to overblow it, but you don't want to underblow it either. We don't want to overstate or understate the magnificence of who we are. And there's a real opportunity right now and an invitation to step into something bigger. And I bless whoever is listening to this right now that you needed to listen to this right now, because there's some invitation that God is sending to you through this conversation that's meant for you, to say, this is your birthright, and you can step into the fullness of who you are, and without fear, and without just with an embracing of the fact that we're in a new era.
You said, who am I in the face of all of these tzaddikim? I think that that's a sentence that a lot of people feel, that like, oh, our generation is not a spiritual generation, or we don't have the right to enact any change, or to have this like vision for the future, or recognize what's needed right now and to really lean into it, or to like step into our own voices, because we feel like we're so small in the face of such a giant, incredible tradition. What is it like to work through that for anyone who really does feel that, and thinks like, I'm just a small little person in my life looking to these giants, these Jewish giants, and I see that we're living in this pivotal time when I could step into something and do something, but I still feel like I'm so small and can't really enact change in this spiritual way that you're describing.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've been blessed to have enough evidence to me that, like, oh, I had a dream and then I saw it on the TV. Like,
Wild.
there's like an accumulation of evidence that allows me to fall back on that. So I guess the question being like, okay, well, if I didn't have those experiences, would I still be able to feel this way? And what if you're not? What if you don't have those programs on your hard drive per se? And then how do you generate it? So it goes back to an earlier question you asked of like, what do you do in order to allow for that channeling to happen? So I think it goes back to that place of, take it seriously, take your dreams seriously, try to remember them, write them down. They are the access to your soul. And learn inner Torah, learn deeper Torah, learn mystical Torah. Focus your energies on the realms that are going to expand your soul, and focus there. So prioritization of spiritual matters and endeavors and practices and disciplines, I think is really crucial, because that's when you do that, then you do get the experiences, and then you do build that body of evidence, that mounting body of evidence that, yes, I am a neshama on fire with expressing, God in the world. Like, that comes through a life dedicated to spiritual work.
I love that you said that like you create the environment that allows that to flourish, and you can do that slowly by leaning into the deeper parts of Torah, the deeper parts of yourself.
There's not a lot of value paid in the world to the intangibles of dreams and the intangibles of spirituality. It's not it's not physical, it's not material, and so it's very easy to, not invest in it and to just work on making money and to work on getting your body fit. Like it's those such tangible distractions. The tangibilities are distractions that we need to do, obviously, to some extent, but to really take this seriously and value it is like, my deepest prayer for the Jewish world right now is that we can take the spiritual teachings and our spiritual work very seriously, just like, we're an existential threat in this country and the soldiers are risking their lives and taking their work very seriously. It's very serious work. So too is our spiritual work right now. It's very serious and saving lives in ways that we can't know. And that's the hard thing. You pray for somebody, you pray for something, and usually 99% of the time we don't get clear answers to that. We don't get that feedback loop of, oh yeah, that worked. I mean, sometimes it does, and those are really fortifying, but it's a lot of emunah and faith in this path.
Yeah. It goes back to that trust and being that channel. Even when you like called the person who's listening and said, maybe like God is telling this to you through me. Not that like when we listen to anything, everything is like divinely sent to us. So you right now in this moment can be a channel for someone else, and like paying attention to those signs. It could be as you experience, like literally like hearing a voice or having a dream, or sometimes it's something that someone says to you or something that you hear at the right time, and trusting that you didn't hear that by mistake. And if it woke something up inside of you, you should like follow that little spark.
Well, Rob Tzadok Cohen says that a bat kol, this mystical concept of a bat kol, a daughter voice, is a heavenly voice that can come down into this world. He says that a bat kol can be when you're walking by someone and you overhear something in their conversation that is relevant for an issue in your own life. So just kind of eavesdropping in a public setting can be a form of bat kol. We can expand our spiritual concepts as well. So yeah, I'm sure right now that I'm a bat kol, and we're a bat kol right now, or whoever's listening. It is a bat kol, a godly voice that's talking directly to you. And
I love that you brought a source for that intuition. Like we have that intuition, we have that experience of like hearing things and being sent in certain directions. And then there's like a mystical teacher who has something to offer on that topic and literally like parallels it completely. You mentioned that we're in a Messianic era, and I think that everyone has this like different reaction to it. Some people feel like we're in this dystopian era, everything is like leading to the end of times. And some people feel like this is a Messianic era, and this is leading to like the beginning of times, the ultimate light, like the most beautiful state of the world. How are you experiencing this specifically as a Messianic era? What is leading you to say that?
Yeah. So I just came out with a book called Ink from Ash, which is about, and it's a book with my writings about Israel and this war. And the point of the book is that we should take from the ash of the destruction and the trauma and make of it ink. Actually, that's how a Torah scroll ink was one of the ancient recipes for how to make the ink for a Torah scroll is a type of resin and type of ash.
Ooh.
So there's an idea that we can take this destruction and uplift it and turn it into our expression and in our empowerment and our sense of mission and our sense of calling. And that is the opportunity of this war entirely. So I have this book about it. And then this summer in America, I did a bunch of shows where I lead people on a journey of, okay, how do we do this? I use spoken word, and I invite people to, I call it entertainment as opposed to entertainment, like entertainment, like let's go inside. Yes, I'm going to say some poems that are going to be entertaining, but the whole point is to engage deeply with yourself. And so it's based on a core idea. So I want to give over this idea because it's just so divine. And so it's a teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he talks about that we are in this world to make a movement from Gola to Geula. Gola means like galut, it means exile. So that can be the physical exile of the Jewish people, or it can be a mental state of exile and fragmentation, versus Geula, which is the redeemed state. It's the Jewish people back in the land of Israel in power, but it's also a mental state of Geula. And the only difference between Gola and Geula is one letter. There's an aleph that's inserted right into the material of Gola. And of course, in Jewish mysticism, we have this idea that the Hebrew letters are actual energies. So you take the actual matter, the energetic matter of Gola, and you insert into it the aleph letter. And aleph is the first letter. It represents, the Rebbe says, it represents Aluf Haolam, the creator of the world, the champion of the world, the beginner of the world. It represents divine consciousness. And he breaks it down into a number of different categories, which I'll get into in a second. But the main idea being that when we bring in divine consciousness into that Gola state, that's how we engage with creating Geula. The only way to get to Geula is to first have the Gola material and to schlep into it a higher consciousness. So the only, why does God need war? Why do we need this pain?
Yeah.
Because it's the materials of the recipe for Geula that when you take that pain and you bring in a higher consciousness to it, that's the only way to get this magical, redemptive, expansive, godly vista come through the material world. So every time we experience pain, we should not jump over the pain. Spiritual escapism doesn't allow us to get to Geula, because the only way to get to Geula is to go through the pain. So we don't want to do spiritual escapism that's just like, oh, we're in a Messianic era, and no.
No.
I mean, that's great, but we must encounter the reality of the pain and the challenge and the fight, as Israel right now is literally in, and we have literally hostages in a terror dungeon. We are in the Gola.
Yeah.
And every time we take that very seriously and bring in and schlep in that higher consciousness, then we do our part in creating Geula and bringing that Messianic process forward collectively and individually. So the Rebbe, and then I'll say the last part of the Torah, which is the Rebbe has 3 ways of doing this, all based on that aleph. So first is divine consciousness, realizing the Aluf Haolam, the master of the world, realizing everything's from God, number 1. Everything is from God. Those hostages in the dungeons are from God. Schlepping in the divine, praying to God, praying about the thing, praying for the hostages, begging of God to change this reality. So our prayer, bringing in the aleph through prayer, through recognition of the divine. Number 2 is like an ulpan. The letters of ulpan are aleph, lamed, pei, nun, aleph. Ulpan is a place of learning. If we encounter this as the curriculum for our greatest learning and expansion and growth, and we learn from it, that's also bringing it into Geula. And the third permutation of the aleph is Pele. If you take the letters of aleph, lamed, pei, which are the 3 letters that spell aleph, and you turn it around, it's pei, lamed, aleph, which is Pele, which means miracle, which is the ability to see the miraculous in everything that's happening and experience the miraculous. And like we were talking about before, of that faith of saying, yes, we're in a miraculous process right now, and we can do miraculous things. And embracing the Pele of reality that sometimes feels impossible, but embracing the possibility of wonders and miracles. And so that's what I base the whole show on, is working with each of those modalities. And I invite people to think about what now is your Gola. Like, what's the hardest thing for you right now? That can be personally, or it can be nationally or globally. Think about that Gola and then schlep in the aleph in all of these 3 ways. And we have to keep on stirring it by doing our own inner work and our inner processing. And every time we do that, we're doing our contribution.
believing that this is from God, praying to God to fix it, and believing that we can see wonders and miracles.
And learning, and then the opana.
Learning. Oh, and learning, recognizing this is an opportunity for our own learning and growth and expansion.
Yeah.
Oof, that is.
And probably also teaching. I mean, he didn't say that. He didn't get so detailed, but learning and teaching.
Yeah, well, that's like the deepest way to learn too, is to teach. Yeah. That is a huge thing to be able to like work through that process. Have you been able to do that with what's going on in Israel? To like really lean into those experiences?
Every day. Every day. That's what we're doing. And I'm doing it with my clients and I'm doing it with my kids. And
Yeah.
that's what we all have to be doing right now. And you have to, because it's either you sit there and you suffer and you're depressed,
I know.
Or you figure out how to be in the pain and figure out mental ways through it. And there's a resilience that we're seeing born through this that's incredible. So listen, I tend towards the positive. I know there's a lot of people in a lot of pain right now, and there's a lot of people who'll be like, okay, Chaya, whatever. Like, no, this just sucks, and it's unjust and not okay. Like, I get that.
Yeah. You noted how moving from exile to redemption requires like bringing the olive into the exile, into the physical matter, and not just like running away to this like horizon of light and love and forgetting the pain or the suffering that we are currently going through. Can you describe like what it actually feels like to move through that, to move from to move within the pain and the suffering and draw in that olive? If you want to give like any specific example, either with yourself or a client or someone you know, to just like kind of help us imagine what that might look like to really feel the olive in that painful experience.
There have been so many videos, rolling around all of our consciousness, that there's a video of a woman who's doing hafrashat challah with like a group of women because her husband is she hadn't talked to her husband and he was in Gaza, etc. And she does hafrashat challah and she like says the bracha, and this is all being like videoed, and she just takes the challah and she says the bracha, and then all of a sudden her husband calls, out of nowhere. And it's like this pele that happened to get captured on somebody's phone. Usually they don't get captured, but there it was captured. And so I think one thing is just swimming in that and like generating a lot of being careful what you consume, being careful what you consume and trying to consume things that are pele oriented, I think is one thing that I've done, that's been really fortifying for me. But I think your question is a deeper one, which is what's it like when you go into the gola of the actual pain? So one thing that I'll mention here is that so a lot of the dream work that I do is, like I said, so I'll go back to a broader teaching, which is the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Italian mystic, teaches in Derech Hashem, the way of God, kind of core fundamental Jewish text, also a mystical text, but it's also pretty widely received in all Jewish realms. So he teaches that every night when we go to sleep, we have 5 levels of our soul, and 4 of those levels, the top 4 levels, ascend out of our body, leaving the lowest level, the nefesh, down in our body. But it's called the Naran Chai, so the Ruach, Neshama, Chaya Yechida are all ascending above at night when we sleep and dream. And those higher parts are able to roam the celestial realm and receive information from God or from angels or from Shadim. And a Shin Dalet is like a negative spirit. And you got to be careful, because sometimes information will come from an angel or sometimes it will come from God, but it can also come from a negative place. And if you have all the rungs of your 5 worlds well connected, then you can take that information down back into your nefesh consciousness, your conscious self, and remember the content, and it can guide your life.
Yeah.
So the goal is having all those rungs steady in place to be deeply grounded in our nefesh and in our body and able to bring those messages from on high all the way down. So I take this very seriously, and that's what I try to do with my dreaming, and is this shidduch between my conscious self and my higher conscious self, and that they should have a really good relationship, and do couples therapy between my levels of consciousness so that they are communicating well with each other. And when those levels are in deep communion and communication with each other, when I'm honoring my unconscious material and I'm cleaning out my conscious material by doing therapy and journaling, and when I do all that work, then I bring down these messages. So for me during this war, my dream space has been a very profound theater for my inner work, and and so I want to share with you a dream.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm so ready. Let's go.
Okay. And this is all to answer your question in a very long way.
No, but I love it.
So October 7th hit, Simchas Torah. We were freaking out, sirens nonstop, insanity. Mm-hmm. One time when we were in the bomb shelter, a man came in from off the street. He's like, I need to tell you guys what's actually going on because I know you're religious and you didn't look. He tells us about what's actually happening. So we're aware of what's happening. And we get through, we have the most intense, powerful day of singing and prayer, Simchas Torah, and we come out and I'm freaking out all day. And I'm in it. I'm really in an intense Gola place, and we're just praying our minds out. And I keep on remembering this dream that I'd had, and it brings me great comfort. I'm freaking out, but I keep on reminding myself of this dream of a tree. And I don't even remember the details. But then after Chag, I'm like, it keeps coming to me, and I'm like, I got to check out, what is this dream? So luckily, I take my dreaming seriously, and every morning I record a voice message to myself of whatever I've dreamt in the night. And then every 3 weeks or so, I write all that into a document on my Google Drive. So I have all my dreams on a Google Drive, and all I have to do is to go into the search, and I put in a word, and then I have all that material. So I put in tree, and boom, there comes the dream. And I see the dream that I was thinking of, but then I see that it actually wasn't just one dream. It was actually a second dream. There was a first dream. So I'll start with the first dream. The first dream was Nova. And the date that I'm looking in the document, the date of the dream, is exactly 1 year to the day before. So exactly 1 year earlier, on Simchas Torah, the night after Simchas Torah, really, I had that dream and I recorded it. So 1 year later, I'm sitting here and I read through the first dream, and it is Nova. We're in a field, we're running, we're being attacked from above and from in front of us by these soldiers, and it's a slaughterhouse, and it's just horrific slaughtering and havoc. And I'm so disturbed in the dream that I pull myself out of the dream, which I'll do oftentimes when I get a really scary dream. I'm sure other dreamers too. You pull yourself out often. Not ideal, but it's something that we do. So I pulled myself out of the dream, and I recorded it into my phone. I said, "Dear God, how dare you? How dare you do this to us? You've already done the Holocaust to us. How dare you do this to us?" And I was just furious at God, because I was like, no, this is coming. How dare you? But I also know the importance of going back into the dream. And so I go back in and I dream the second dream, the one that I remembered. I'd blocked out the first dream entirely. The second dream was, we were in the Messianic era, and we're all wearing these beautiful, colorful saris, and we have totally refined God consciousness. we are rejoicing and dancing. I'm with children, my children's children and the grandchildren. And it is the Messianic era, and we know it. And we're underneath this big, beautiful tree. And I sit the grandchildren on my lap and I show them the stages. Like I have like a phone that shows them the stages that got us from dream number 1 to dream number 2. And I show them how with dream number 1, a tree got burnt out and this tree got destroyed and they had to schlep out the tree. And then they had to bring in a new tree, which is a small tree, and they planted it. But this new tree has been growing and growing, and the new tree was able to have fruits like the first tree never could have been fruitful. And we're underneath this Messianic tree, and we're rejoicing. And we all have totally refined God consciousness. That is the definer. I can see the outline of the boundaries of the land of Israel. There's still things that can happen. Like our enemies are not totally gone, but anything that happens, because our consciousness has been so refined, we know that it's all from God. So, okay, there might not be total peace out there, but each of us inside was in total peace because we had full God consciousness. The only way that we had that God consciousness in the dream, I knew this, was the way that we got that God consciousness was we started with dream number 1. And then we worked and we worked and we worked on our collective consciousness until we were all of evolved, divinely inspired consciousness. And everything was good. So that dream has been my guiding light this whole war, because I'm sitting here suffering and, friends dying but I know that this is the process that's refining us and getting us to the place of the Messianic consciousness. And I embrace that and I accept that. So that's my answer to your question.
Wow. That was more than I bargained for. That was incredible.
And I hope people can hear that. Like I at the time I knew it was a prophetic dream. I was like, God gave me this dream. It's going to happen. And I know that. And maybe people won't believe me, or they'll just say, okay, weird Chaya Lester in Jerusalem, whatever. But I know it. And it allows me to live in a different plane. And it allows me to live this Gola in a way that's inspiring and deep and amazing and painful. But I know it's going in a great direction.
You mentioned how we can have dreams and hear from God's voice, from our soul's voice, from an angel, or from a shade, an unholy spirit. And I'm curious to know what your barometer is for knowing if this really feels like prophetic or the voice of God, or maybe more of like a self-sabotaging voice. Because sometimes our dreams can be like our subconscious is so afraid of something. Someone can have a dream about the world ending or, losing everyone, things like that. How do you know when to trust your dream and say,
Definitely had a lot of scary dreams during this war where I was like, that was just pure anxiety.
Okay.
Like that was just me working out my anxious material. So I think at the end of the day, you just know. When you know, and some, but sometimes I'll have to wake up and be like, was that like a prophetic dream or am I just anxious? And oftentimes I'm anxious and it's not a prophetic dream, but when it is a prophetic dream, usually I know. Usually I can tell, or like I'm told that.
Wow.
So, and that's also in our sources that talk about dream stuff. And I have a whole dream course as well, where I just amass all these Jewish sources on it. And it talks about that. It's like, there's something where when you know, you know.
You've created a course that has assembled all the sources, all the Jewish sources on dreams and the significance of dreams.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know you just came out with a new poetry collection, Ink from Ash, as you shared so beautifully and also described like making ink from ash. I'm wondering if you would be open to closing with a poem from your new collection, maybe one that like calls to you.
Be a ladder. Climb and yet root. Court the heights and yet cake the boots with the earthly truth of mud and drudge. Get messy in this mundane mess where every mess can be messianic. Our mission is to be a mansion made of brick and mortar, and yet to know the immortal order that daily forms our base. From basement to spine to highest spire, our job is to inspire the lower to love the higher. And you, lucky you get to be the ritualist that bridges the distances, that weds them both in a holy matrimony of paradoxical grace. Be the quiet vine that climbs to the heights with roots entwined in the depths. Become adept at spanning that massive stretch with the long, steady march of your breath. Though you be an ambassador of spirit, don't give in to the sin of spiritual escapism, but rather befriend each wretched inch of this embodiment. Confer compassion upon the broken, listen more than preach, reach inward when outer walls are breached. Be a docent of the insides, sometimes eulogize long-lost truths and burnt trees. Weave in the ancient wisdom with the latest science. Speak up for the value of silence. Teach the world the spiritual technology of how to see the unseen, how to sanctify, how to dream. Insist upon ascension, but don't resist the dungeons. Become accustomed to praying with your feet. Be a ladder full of reach.
Ooh! Wow. Oh my gosh. That poem was everything that we just spoke about in the hour. We could have just started with the poem and ended there.
I never noticed the burnt tree in there. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Tanya, and you're doing all that. I bless you in your work, everything that you're doing, that you are spanning the distances, and you should have those gifts of it sounds like you do. You're a writer and you're doing your own downloads, and I bless you that this conversation should just be a bot call to you to be like, yeah, I got this. This is mine to live. Yes.
Thank you. This was so gorgeous. I think that you are tapping into, I think every individual in their own experience, this experience that you're describing, call it prophecy, call it intuition, call it being in touch with yourself. Everyone has like their different name for it. Some are more afraid of like the word prophecy, but I do think that in that own inner experience, we're tapping into a collective consciousness and, as you said, like healing something for the entire world. Thank you for sharing your gorgeous spirit. It was such a delight to get to speak with you. And I really encourage anyone who's listening to go, I'll put all your books in the show notes so they can check out your work and your books and hire you to come do an incredible poetry show. Like, I need to be at one of those. So love it. Just gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. This was beautiful. Thank you. Such an honor to meet you and to speak with you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tanya. Hopefully we'll cross paths.
Yeah.
Come to Israel. Come visit.
Yeah, exactly. When I come visit. Totally. It should be soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night. Thank you again. Seriously, this was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating or review. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. You can find us on Instagram at Human and Holy. We love hearing your feedback, so email us at info@humanandholy.com. If you'd like to sponsor an episode in honor of a birthday, a yard site, someone you love, just because you love the work that we're doing, feel free to reach out to us or visit our website, humanandholy.com. And if you are a brand who feels aligned with the work that we're doing and thinks that your work would connect with our audience, reach out to us via info@humanandholy.com. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next week.